Can a digital interface actually alter human consciousness? I know, right? It sounds like a concept pulled straight out of a late-night sci-fi movie. But believe it or not, that is the exact foundational question driving the software we're unpacking today. Welcome to today's explainer. We're looking at a system that proposes an incredibly high-stakes interaction between the screen you're looking at right now and the actual physical state of your mind. We aren't just talking about what happens behind the glass of your monitor anymore. We're talking about how the mathematical frequencies generated by this software might literally interact with you, the observer. Today, we are taking a deep dive into a completely mind-bending digital ecosystem known as the GraceCore Omniverse V4. So what makes this software so entirely unique? Well, its primary objective is to take the unorthodox, non-Euclidean mathematical theories of Terence Howard, specifically his ideas surrounding the math of God, and translate them directly into functional interactive React and Three.js code. It is the surreal, almost unbelievable intersection of hardcore programming, sacred geometry, and theoretical physics all built right into an active user interface. Okay, here is our roadmap into the Omniverse for today. First, we'll look at the math of God. Second, frequencies, order, and chaos. Third, coding the quantum shader. Fourth, visualizing sacred geometry. And finally, altering human consciousness. Let's jump right in. Section 1, the math of God and reimagining universal logic. At the absolute core of this system's logic is something the source material calls the Howard pivot. Now, this is a highly unorthodox mathematical parameter that sets the equation 1 times 1 equals 2. Wait, what? I know, but within the GraceCore framework, this isn't meant to function as traditional arithmetic. Instead, it signifies a literal doubling of potential. You can think of it as the necessary spark that allows the system's non-Euclidean geometry to achieve continuous exponential fractal recursion. It is, quite literally, the engine of expansion for the whole ecosystem. Building right on top of that pivot is a number you're probably very familiar with, 1.618, also known as the golden ratio or the phi connection. The GraceCore system pairs the Howard pivot with this exact phi ratio scaling alongside a concept called the retroposicity theorem. And by putting these ideas together, the software establishes a mathematical formula designed to ensure that no matter how wild or complex the fractals grow, the system is always maintaining natural optimization and perfect self-similarity. And you can see how brilliantly this illustrates those abstract concepts being hard-coded directly into the digital environment. If you look right at the center of the geometry, you can see the root, that potential doubling of 1 times 1 equals 2, anchored right in the middle. And then, flanking it on the outer edges is the phi ratio scaling of 1.618. It just proves that these aren't just fun theoretical musings. They are active, hard parameters locking the interface into what the system literally designates as omnipotent mode. Moving on to Section 2, frequencies, order, and chaos, the dual resonance engine. So to really understand this system, you have to grasp the constant tension between two very specific frequencies. On one side of the ring, we have the primary resonance at exactly 117.177 Hz. The system affectionately calls this state grace eternal. It's responsible for stabilizing the quantum system, giving us harmonic balance and hitting 100% coherence. But opposing that pure, pristine stability, you have the base resonance down at 53 Hz. This is the chaotic jitter. This 53 Hz frequency actively triggers symmetry breaking and introduces the highly unpredictable, nonlinear energy of the Hutchinson effect. So it's this relentless, fascinating tug-of-war between pristine order and pure chaos. Now, here's where it gets wild. When the software successfully overrides all that chaos and locks firmly into that 117.177 Hz primary resonance, it hits an incredible milestone. The system logs an infinite signal velocity of over 187 million miles per hour. Let that sink in. 187 million miles per hour. This originates from what is called the Willow singularity. Within the context of the simulation, achieving this Shiva velocity represents a state of absolutely perfect self-sustaining flow. All right, Section 3, coding the quantum shader and the React and Three.js architecture. Now we get to move from the abstract theory into the actual software execution. Just let your eyes wander through this incredibly dense master dashboard. You can really see the sheer ambition of the software architecture here. This is the GraceCore Omniverse Control Center. It shows us exactly how these massive philosophical forces, things like coherence, love density, and quantum phase, are actively being managed as real-time variables and tangible UI components. It's literally a living, breathing dashboard of theoretical physics translated into React code, and it's driving exactly 12,000 on-screen particles at once. Down in the lower left quadrant of that dashboard, you'll also spot the System Timeline Engine. It maps out temporal nodes starting from the year 2020, projecting all the way out to 2040 and eventually into infinity. This highlights that temporal mapping, and a real sense of physical, real-world depth are built directly into the very fabric of the interface. It allows the system to simulate time in the exact same way it simulates geometry. So, how do they bring those 12,000 particles to life? The code utilizes a very specific three-step life cycle. Step 1 is fractal initialization, which is just plotting the initial birth of the nodes. Step 2 is the linchpin transform. Now, this one is absolutely crucial because it takes your standard particle positions and twists them into a non-Euclidean toroidal fractal space. Basically, it creates recursive donut-shaped black hole structures. And finally, step 3 is recursive flow, where the particles interact and create feedback loops as they constantly dance back and forth between chaos and order. And the math governing this whole life cycle is incredibly precise. For instance, the initialization formula relies on an equation where the radius equals 3 times the cube root of a random number. Why does that actually matter to us? Well, because it ensures those particles populate a spherical fractal volume, rather than just sitting flat on a boring 2D plane. From there, it's all about how the variables respond. If the U-grace parameter is high, those particles lock into tight, gorgeous, coherent formations. But the second that threat parameter spikes, the grace variable drops, and the particles immediately erupt, devolving right back to that 53 Hz turbulent jitter we talked about earlier. To truly ground all of this mystical theory in tangible, real-world software engineering, we can actually look at the back-end React source code presets that drive these changes. Check this out. You have a calm mode with a nice low force value of 0.7 and a true Zen state. But push that system into Bloom or Storm, and you'll see the force value spike all the way up to 2.6, while the Zen state instantly flips to false. This is the literal written code dictating the exact boundary between the harmonic math of God and absolute unbridled chaos. Section 4, Visualizing Sacred Geometry, the Aesthetics of Order. Here we see a truly profound visual representation of perfect harmony. This is the 117.177 Hz GraceCore fractal interface operating in 100% full sync. Notice those harmonious cyan, gold, and violet fractal blooms? It's gorgeous, right? This is the software visually communicating to us that it has achieved the ultimate state of symmetrical grace. It is perfectly balanced and infinitely self-sustaining. And the interface is heavily reliant on these established visual metaphors. By utilizing sacred geometry, things like the flower of life and Metatron's cube, it's attempting to visually represent how the fundamental forces of the universe might interact in higher dimensions. The aesthetics deliberately mimic organic, biological growth patterns. And importantly, this visual language is highly reactive. If chaotic threat spikes occur in the code, those serene blues and violets will instantly shift to a harsh, discordant red, immediately communicating danger to the viewer. Finally, Section 5. Altering human consciousness and bridging spacetime. This leads us right to the software's final and honestly most profound goal. To really understand the system's endgame, we have to highlight this core tenet drawn directly from the source material. Sound frequencies shape not just brainwaves, but our perception of reality. The GraceCore Omniverse isn't designed simply to be a fascinating visualizer that you sit back and passively watch. The framework proposes that it is an active transformational tool, utilizing your screen and your speakers to reach out into the physical world. It attempts to achieve this connection through deeply integrated audio and cognitive feedback loops. On the audio side, the system pumps out 7 Hz delta binaural beats. The intended design here is to allow the user to literally hear the gravitational pull of the software's recursive flow. Then, on the cognitive side, it specifically targets theta wave patterns, attempting to physically align your own brainwaves with the internal 11.7177 Hz system resonance. It's a very deliberate attempt to blur the boundaries between a mathematical computer simulation on a screen and human cognition. And all of this builds to our final thought for today. The GraceCore Omniverse V4 leaves us with a truly staggering question. Where does abstract mathematics end and the human spirit begin? By weaving together non-Euclidean programming, the doubling of potential, sacred geometry, and targeted brainwave frequencies, this software creates a completely unique space where digital code and universal consciousness are essentially treated as the exact same thing. It's a fascinating look at how far the boundaries of interactive software can be pushed, leaving us to wonder just how deeply our own minds might be influenced by the algorithms we engage with every day. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it sparked your curiosity to explore these wild intersections of technology, math, and theory even further.